Renata Caldwell kept showing up before the youth center's doors opened, not because anyone asked her to, but because the quiet of early morning felt safer than the noise that followed. The building sat on a side street where storefronts changed hands every few years, a place with peeling paint and a hallway that always smelled faintly of floor cleaner and old paper. By the time the fluorescent lights warmed and the hallway filled with footsteps, Renata already had her tote bag set on a plastic folding table and her kettle steaming on a small hot plate she brought herself. She never announced her arrival. She didn't need to. She moved with the unhurried economy of someone trained to conserve attention. Her hands organized the room while her mind remained elsewhere, already listening for the day's fractures. She could hear them sometimes before people recognized they were there. The way a kid's voice got sharp when it tried to stay brave. The way a laugh turned too loud. The way silence pooled in a corner like spilled water. Renata was a veteran, at least in the way people used the word when they wanted to make someone sound like a relic. She had the steady face of someone who'd learned that the world didn't stop when you were hurt, so you stopped expecting it to. Her medals were mostly out of sight, not hidden out of shame, hidden out of principle. She believed in dignity the way other people believed in locks. You used it so nothing important could be stolen. In the youth center, the center director, Marvin Holt, had wanted Renata's help for months. Marvin's tone was careful when he spoke to the young volunteers. He understood that some things, once said too loudly, couldn't be taken back. He also understood that the center was short-staffed, short on money, and long on problems. When he'd first met Renata, she hadn't offered speeches about service or sacrifice. She'd offered structure, a schedule, a way to break a plan into steps, a calm insistence that nobody was beyond learning. Tess Harper, a volunteer who coordinated weekend programs, had agreed to let Renata lead a mentoring session. Tess had been polite at first, but she was the kind of person who believed in looking forward without getting stuck in the past. She'd seen plenty of adults use former service as a shortcut to authority. She didn't want that. She wanted kids to listen because they respected the work, not because someone said the right titles. When Renata started attending the center regularly, Tess noticed small things. How the boys gathered when Renata spoke. How the girls relaxed when Renata corrected a posture or adjusted a stance. Tess told herself it was just charisma, just experience with people. She didn't want to admit that she felt something else. A quiet pressure behind Renata's calm. A sense that Renata had seen consequences up close and wasn't interested in pretending they were fictional. The first time Tess challenged Renata's presence, it wasn't in public. It was in the staff room, where the coffee tasted burnt and the posters on the wall advertised job training like a promise the building could keep. Tess stood near the copy machine, badge clipped to her hoodie pocket, arms crossed. "We've got rules here," she said, as if rules were a shield. "The kids need real guidance, not role play. We don't do power trips." Renata didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed steady, her mouth relaxed. "If you mean I shouldn't use my past like a weapon," she replied, "then I agree. I won't." Tess's brows drew together. "Good, because I'm not trying to hand them another authority figure they can blame when things go wrong." Renata nodded once. "Then we'll do it differently. We'll build. We'll repair habits, not egos." Tess shifted her weight. She wanted the conversation to end without becoming a confession from either side. "Just keep it practical," she said. "No big stories, no souvenirs." Renata's hands moved like she was already sorting something invisible. "My job is to keep them safer," she answered. "That includes what they see." Tess didn't push further, but her skepticism didn't soften. It simply went quiet, waiting. For weeks, Renata mentored youth who didn't respond to the center's typical approach. The older staff tried routines, schedules, rewards, consequences. Some worked for a day. Then the kids returned to the same angles of anger, the same reflexes to protect themselves with hostility. Renata's method was not dramatic. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She spoke as if the kids already had instincts worth saving, which meant she never acted surprised when they resisted. She gave tasks that forced focus without shame, card sorting to slow down racing thoughts, Simple mechanical repairs to teach patience. A journaling prompt that was never, "Tell us your feelings," but rather, "Write what you noticed today that you can't unsee." One afternoon, she brought a small toolbox to a room that smelled of rubber and old carpet. A boy named Jamal, hard eyes, quick hands, always moving as if the air itself might strike, rolled his shoulders as he watched her open the kit. He didn't ask questions. He acted like questions were for people without problems. Another teen, a girl named Lila, hovered by the doorway with arms tight to her chest. Lila's gaze didn't look away from Renata, but it didn't quite land either. She measured people. That was the way she survived. Renata set the toolbox down and turned to them. "We're not fixing the tool," she said. "We're learning how you think while you fix it." Jamal scoffed. "That's dumb." Renata's expression didn't change. "Tell me what part you think is dumb," she said. Jamal blinked. He hadn't expected her to ask. He'd expected her to wince, to scold, to shut him down. Instead, Renata made him name the exact shape of his complaint. He shrugged, but his shoulders didn't drop. "Like, you can't just—" He waved a hand. "You can't just decide to be different." Renata leaned forward slightly, just enough to make the air feel like it was listening. "You can't decide to be different," she agreed. "You can decide to be consistent. The difference comes later. Consistency is the first door." Lila let out a small breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She didn't smile. She simply stopped retreating. Renata continued, her voice even. "Today's a door. We're going to take apart this latch and put it back together. If it doesn't work, we don't shame it. We learn what it resists." The teens didn't know what to do with that kind of calm. It didn't punish them for being broken. It asked them to participate in their own repair. When the center's other programs struggled, Renata's sessions kept pulling kids back into the room. People noticed. They also noticed what Renata kept out of view. At some point, the volunteer group began gossiping. Not cruel at first, just curious. One of the younger volunteers had caught a glimpse of Renata's chest on a winter day when she adjusted her coat near the doorway. A small glint of metal had flashed as she moved, not enough to identify everything clearly, but enough to plant a thought. Metals. Tess heard the whispering and felt something sharpen. Not envy, something more like alarm. She'd already decided the center couldn't afford spectacle. If Renata's metals were part of the influence, Tess feared the kids would chase the shine and ignore the substance. The next week, Tess arranged a community recognition moment. It was supposed to be a simple event, a way to show donors the center's impact. She invited the youth, asked them to share what they'd built, and planned a short segment where staff and mentors could say a few words. Renata had agreed to attend. She didn't know Tess's plan, but she sensed something in the way Tess's eyes kept darting toward Renata's tote bag, the one that seemed to hold everything but never looked heavy. On the day of the event, the center filled with folding chairs and the smell of cheap pizza. A few donors sat near the front, wearing the kind of clean clothes that never met damp pavement. Kids sat in clustered groups, pretending not to watch the adults while also scanning every face for signs of what they might get. Marvin stood at the front, his posture that of someone trying to hold a building together. He moved between the stage and the crowd, checking microphones and shifting program sheets. He offered quick smiles to Tess and quick nods to Renata, as if reinforcing an agreement to keep the day simple. Tess's confidence carried the microphone. "Before we start," she said, "we want to thank our mentors. Renata Caldwell has been helping the kids." Tess paused in a way that made the pause feel intentional. "And I know she brought some decorations." A few people laughed lightly, the kind of laughter that makes itself comfortable by pretending it doesn't judge. Renata stood at the side of the stage, hands at her sides. She wore a plain sweater. Her medals were not displayed. They were present only as a possibility, the kind of possibility that rumor pretended to confirm. Tess didn't move closer. She aimed her attention toward Renata while speaking to the crowd. "Look, I'm not saying anything bad," she said, a disclaimer that landed like a challenge. "But I want to be clear. This is about mentoring, not—" She made a vague gesture. "Whatever that is." Marvin's face tightened. He reached for an intervention but didn't complete it. He'd learned that the most harmful words often traveled faster than hands. Renata stepped forward when Marvin didn't. She didn't rush. She didn't take the microphone. She stood near it and spoke with the same grounded voice she used in the classroom. "I don't wear my medals for applause," Renata said. "If you need to know what I earned, you won't get it from my clothing. You'll get it from how I show up." The crowd shifted. Some people looked at each other, unsure how to hold themselves now that the moment wasn't going as planned. Tess's cheeks colored slightly. She tried to regain control with humor. "Okay," Tess said, "but if you're so humble, why not just tell us who you were? That's all I'm asking." The air felt heavier. Kids who had been listening to the pizza advertisements and donation calls suddenly found themselves paying attention with their whole bodies. Renata's eyes moved across the room, not searching for enemies, just scanning for the youth. She could see their faces, the ones who believed adults when adults rewarded performance, the ones who had learned not to believe, the ones who could smell insincerity like smoke. Renata didn't answer Tess's question directly. Instead, she turned her tote bag slightly so the crowd could see a folded paper tucked into the side pocket. It wasn't a medal. It wasn't a ribbon. It was a program schedule, printed neatly, with her handwriting on the margins. "I came here to teach a skill," Renata said. "Today's part of that skill. We're going to do something simple. We're going to test what we believe about people." Marvin stepped forward. "Renata," he started, quiet but firm, warning her that the public stage wasn't a classroom. Renata kept going anyway, not stubbornly, but with restraint that suggested she'd weighed the cost. "You asked me who I was," she said to Tess, "but you didn't ask what I do, so I'll show you." Tess looked confused, then annoyed. "Show us what?" she asked. Renata reached into her tote bag and pulled out a laminated card. On it was a list of tasks, each written in short bullet points. No medals, no titles, just steps. "Marvin asked me to run a mentorship block," Renata said. "We start with communication, not speeches, communication. We practice it by having the kids choose one problem and one boundary. Then they tell you what happens if they don't keep that boundary." One of the donors frowned, as if trying to understand whether this was entertainment. Renata lifted her chin slightly, directing the room's attention without raising her voice. "I'm going to ask for a volunteer," she said. "Tess, since you're asking questions." Tess's mouth opened, then closed. The question suddenly felt like a trap she hadn't built. Marvin's eyes widened a fraction. He looked at Tess, then at Renata. He realized Renata was refusing the easy route, refusing to fight back with rank or anger. She was forcing everyone to confront the real subject, whether the room cared about youth safety or about using credentials as proof. Tess hesitated. "I don't need to volunteer," she said, but her tone lacked certainty now. Renata nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that. "Then one of our teens will." She turned to the kids. "Who wants to show the class how we practice boundaries?" A boy near the back stood up too quickly, like he'd been waiting for permission. He shoved his hands into his pockets, jaw set. "I'll do it," he said. Renata pointed gently. "Name the problem," she told him. "Not the story, the problem." The boy swallowed. "I get mad," he said, blunt. "I get mad and I don't think. Then I say things I can't take back." Renata's voice stayed calm. "Good. That's honest. Now name one boundary." The boy stared at the floor as if the floor had the answer. "No texting when I'm mad," he said. "I wait." Tess's eyes sharpened, suspicion returning. "Waiting doesn't fix anything," she said, sharper than she intended. Renata didn't react to the insult. She simply turned back to the boy. "Tell them what happens when you keep that boundary." The boy looked up, and for a second his face softened. "It's like my brain stops lighting everything on fire," he said. "I can actually hear what people mean." The room grew quiet, not because everyone agreed, but because they recognized the skill had nothing to do with being impressive. It had to do with surviving what came next. Renata looked at Tess again. "You asked who I was," she said. "I am someone who learned that a moment can ruin everything, so I practice restraint. That's all. Restraint is a kind of armor. Tess looked away as if the answer had embarrassed her. But she wasn't finished with her need to control the narrative. She stepped toward Renata and spoke into the microphone without asking permission from anyone. All right, if she wants to talk about restraint, let's talk about what she really has. Tess reached toward Renata's tote bag with 2 fingers, not touching Renata directly, but implying ownership of the contents. Renata's hand came up, not in anger, not in threat, in protection of the space around her dignity. Don't, Renata said. The word was quiet. It didn't need to be louder. Tess paused, then laughed. See? That's exactly what I'm saying. Everyone's got secrets. Marvin took a step forward this time. Tess, he said, stop. Tess held her smile in place. Why? Because there's something there? Like proof? Her tone was now openly challenging. Renata exhaled slowly. The crowd waited, some people leaning forward, some people annoyed, most unsure what kind of story they were participating in. Renata didn't insist on silence. She didn't demand respect. She just answered the question that Tess had asked all along, the one beneath the teasing. Everything you need to know is in the paperwork I carry for the kids, Renata said. But since you want a detail, I'll give you a detail. Not to make you feel small, to make the room honest. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a small envelope. The motion was steady. The sound it made was minimal, a soft scrape of paper. From inside the envelope, Renata removed a single card, the kind used to identify someone for training or authorization. On it was a call sign printed in crisp letters. Tess's eyes flicked to it, and her face changed before she could stop it. She tried to read fast, failed, and then read again as if the meaning might rearrange itself if she stared hard enough. Renata didn't say the call sign right away. She looked at the crowd first. You wanted to know who I was, Renata said, so you can know who you invited into this room. She held the card up just above chest height so everyone could see it, not waving, not performing. The crowd saw the bold text. The Reaper. For a moment, nobody reacted. It wasn't dramatic silence. It was something closer to the body refusing to invent a response fast enough to match what the eyes had just confirmed. Then Marvin Holt spoke. Not loud, not to seize the moment, but because his voice needed to exist in the room. Renata, he began. Renata lowered the card slightly, still visible to the front row and to the kids who had begun to understand that this wasn't about medals or stories. It was about consequence. Tess's mouth opened as if she might apologize, but her words couldn't find a safe shape. Her face looked like she'd been holding a wrong assumption in place, and now it had slipped. A donor cleared his throat. Another shifted in his chair and stopped halfway through standing. Renata didn't smile at anyone's discomfort. She offered only the truth that had remained disciplined under pressure. This call sign doesn't belong to me anymore, she said evenly. It belongs to the work that had to get done and the people who couldn't take the risk of getting it wrong. I'm not here to ask for worship. I'm here because some of these kids will be handed decisions they didn't earn. I want them to have restraint before the world forces it. She paused, letting the room digest that restraint had been the through line. If you think I'm only medals, Renata continued, then you only learned how to look. If you think I'm only a volunteer, then you learned how to dismiss. She stepped back to give the teens space again. The crowd still didn't know how to hold what they'd assumed. Adults often wanted redemption to be loud, but Renata made it quiet by keeping her voice steady. Marvin reached for the microphone, but Renata didn't give him a chance to rescue the moment with a speech. Instead, she turned to Tess. You asked for proof, she said. You got it. Now ask for something useful. Tess swallowed. Her voice came out smaller. What do we do now? She asked. Renata's eyes softened just a fraction. Not pity, recognition. We keep doing the same work, she answered. But we do it without pretending labels replace teaching. You stop making doubt the entertainment. Tess looked at the kids then, properly this time, as if the presence of a call sign had finally cleared enough mental clutter for her to see the boys and girls as people, not problems. The youth center's noise, chairs creaking, the murmur of confusion, failed to fully return. The event continued on paper, but the emotional rhythm had changed. People could feel that they'd witnessed something they couldn't undo. Later, after the chairs were stacked and the donors drifted toward the exit with practiced politeness, Marvin walked Renata to the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of pizza lingered, and the building looked suddenly older than it had an hour earlier. Marvin didn't scold Tess. He didn't excuse her either. He looked at Renata with a kind of exhausted respect, the kind people have when they realize power can be quiet. "You didn't have to do that on stage," Marvin said. Renata folded the call-sign card back into the envelope. "I didn't want to," she admitted, "but she was reaching into my bag like she owned it. If I stayed silent, it would teach the kids that boundaries don't exist when people get embarrassed." Marvin nodded slowly. "So this was for them," he said. Renata shook her head. "It was for all of us," she corrected. "They don't need more adults who flinch away from truth. They need adults who can hold truth without making it a weapon." Marvin stared at the floor for a moment. He thought about how he'd hesitated when Tess provoked Renata. He'd told himself he was being neutral, but neutrality could become complicity when someone was about to cross a line. He exhaled. "I'll talk to her," he said. Renata adjusted the strap on her tote bag. "Talk to her carefully," she replied. "If she apologizes like it's a performance, it won't fix anything." Marvin gave a small nod. "And you?" he asked. Renata looked down the hallway where the kids were gathering for an evening group session. She could hear their voices now, quieter but more present. "I'll keep mentoring," she said. "I'll keep showing up. That doesn't change because the room finally understood." The next day, Tess found Renata alone in the classroom. The room was empty except for a shelf of markers and a whiteboard with yesterday's schedule half erased. Tess stood near the door, hands in her pockets, eyes trained on the floor. "I owe you an apology," Tess began. Renata didn't interrupt. She didn't rescue Tess from discomfort. She simply waited, allowing the apology to find an honest rhythm. Tess swallowed hard. "I thought I was protecting the kids from the past becoming a show. I didn't realize I was making the kids watch me pretend I didn't care about your humanity." Renata's face remained calm. "What did you think it was?" she asked. Tess's voice lowered. "I thought you were using it," she said. "I thought you wanted authority." Renata nodded once, not to agree, but to confirm she understood the shape of Tess's fear. "You were afraid the kids would chase a celebrity version of respect," she said. "So you attacked first. You wanted control." Tess flinched at the accuracy. "Yes," she admitted. "I wanted to be right." Renata stepped slightly closer, not invading space, just making the conversation feel human. "Being right is easy," she said. "Being useful is harder." Tess lifted her gaze. Her eyes looked wet but not spilling. "What can I do?" she asked. Renata looked past Tess for a moment, as if counting the days, the sessions, the kids who needed continuity more than they needed reconciliation. "Help me with structure," Renata answered. "Not with theatrics. When you coordinate, stop trying to win approval from adults who only care how things look." Tess nodded rapidly. "I can do that," she said. Renata considered her for a breath. "And," Renata added, "if you ever feel the urge to challenge me again, do it privately, not in front of the kids. They already have enough witnesses to their mistakes." Tess's shoulders dropped. "Okay," she said quietly. "Privately." Renata offered a small nod. "Good. Then we can move." That evening, the youth center gathered for another session. The kids arrived with the usual mix of defiance and curiosity. Some had heard rumors. They didn't understand everything, but they understood this. Adults had doubted Renata, and truth had made the room stop. Renata didn't address the call sign. She didn't mention the Reaper again. She didn't let the kids turn it into mythology. She kept returning the focus to behavior. The activity that night was simple, a pause and plan drill. It was not about tactical skills, it was about decision-making when emotions surged. Renata wrote 3 words on the board: pause, plan, protect. She turned to the kids. "When you get mad," she said, "you'll feel like you have one option: act. Tonight we learn how to delay the action long enough for the right choice to show up. A boy in the back scoffed under his breath. Right choice, he muttered. Renata heard him. Her voice didn't shift. Yeah, she replied. The right choice isn't about being perfect. It's about being less reckless than you were yesterday. A couple of kids looked down, surprised that the standard wasn't impossible. It was simply measurable. Renata handed each kid a blank card and asked them to write a situation. Not a fantasy, not a courtroom argument, a real scenario they'd face again. As they wrote, Renata walked the room. She paused near a girl who kept rubbing her wrist as if it itched. I don't know what to write, the girl said. Renata tilted her head. Then write what you avoid, she said. The girl blinked, caught by the directness. I avoid admitting I'm scared, she said. Her voice was almost a whisper. Renata nodded. Then your pause isn't weakness, she said. Your pause is respect for your future. She moved on, letting the words land. She didn't need to build drama around the kids' vulnerability. She made the process safe enough for them to choose it themselves. While the group worked, Marvin watched from the doorway. Tess sat with him, no longer standing like a guard dog. She looked attentive, as if learning a language she hadn't bothered to study. Marvin's expression was thoughtful. He realized the center had done more than mentor youth. It had taught adults that restraint didn't mean silence in the face of harm. Restraint meant precision, knowing when to speak, knowing when to protect, knowing when to let the truth do its work without performing. Renata ended the session with a question that seemed ordinary until you understood it was a test. What do you do with shame? She asked. The kids shifted. Some had learned to hide shame by getting louder. Others had learned to cover it with humor. A few had learned to weaponize it. Renata didn't wait long. She spoke softly. Shame isn't a plan, it's a feeling. Feelings pass when you stop asking them to drive. She pointed at pause. This is how you get your hands back on the wheel. Later, when the session ended, the hallway filled with the sound of teenagers gathering backpacks and pretending they weren't affected. They were affected. They were just not used to adults who didn't turn redemption into a show. Renata packed up her tote bag. As she zipped it, she paused, feeling the envelope inside. She touched it lightly, not checking it, just acknowledging it. It wasn't a trophy. It was paperwork, another kind of responsibility. Tess approached, hesitating the way someone does when they want to repair but doesn't know what repair looks like. I heard what you said, Tess told Renata, about boundaries. Renata looked at her with calm acceptance. Good, she said. Tess nodded. I also heard the part where you didn't turn it into revenge, she added. I didn't know that was possible. Renata's expression remained steady. Revenge is loud, she replied. People confuse loudness for justice. But justice doesn't need volume. It needs truth. Tess seemed to absorb that, storing it like a tool. Marvin walked over and joined them. The three of them stood in the hallway where the light flickered slightly, where the building's imperfections were visible to anyone who looked. It wasn't an inspiring background. It was ordinary. That, Renata believed, made it real. Marvin cleared his throat. If you're willing, he said, we could formalize your mentoring. Not because of the call sign. Renata didn't react with pride. She only asked, what do you want it to be about? Marvin thought carefully, as if choosing words to avoid another unintended spectacle. I want it to be about the kids having someone who doesn't fold, he said. Someone who stays. Someone who can handle chaos without making it worse. Renata nodded. Then yes, she answered. We'll do it. Marvin turned to Tess. Will you help? He asked. Tess's shoulders tightened, but this time she tightened with commitment instead of defensiveness. Yes, she said. I'll help the right way. Renata started to walk toward the door. She paused at the threshold and looked back. The youth center's parking lot glowed under a late afternoon sun. A few teenagers sat on the steps, talking quietly among themselves, their faces less guarded than they had been earlier. The crowd that had once mocked and questioned had gone home with a story they couldn't fully handle. They'd witnessed the moment when suspicion met truth, and the room had gone silent. It wasn't that people suddenly became saints. It was that the truth had forced them to confront how easily they'd let assumptions govern their mouths. Renata didn't claim victory. She didn't chase attention. She simply returned to the quiet work that made the moment matter. And as the weeks continued, people began to understand that redemption didn't arrive with a grand speech. It arrived with a person who held the line, boundaries steady, hands calm, truth revealed only as needed. Renata Caldwell stayed consistent. The kids learned that restraint was not refusal to feel. It was refusal to let feelings burn down a future. The day eventually came when a few donors returned, not with curiosity this time, but with requests for more time, more sessions, more structure. They asked about programs, not prestige. Tess asked how to implement training that respected the kids' dignity. Marvin asked Renata for advice on keeping the center safe without turning it into fear. Renata offered answers that didn't center herself. She spoke about routines that kept adrenaline from ruling decisions. She spoke about how to correct without humiliating. She spoke about how to make accountability feel like a door rather than a punishment. When someone finally asked Tess again about what happened on stage, Tess didn't talk about humiliation. She didn't gloat. She didn't dramatize the crowd's silence. She simply said, "She showed us restraint. Then she showed us truth. And we didn't know how to hold it. That's why the room went quiet." Renata heard that sentence in passing, not because she needed credit, but because it sounded like an accurate summary of what she'd tried to do all along. In the end, the story wasn't about what the crowd assumed. It was about what they learned to do after the silence. Renata Caldwell kept mentoring. She kept her medals in a folder where they belonged, not on a stage, not in a tote bag to win arguments, but in the quiet space where responsibility lived. The kids kept coming back, and the adults, finally, learned to stop mistaking credentials for character and to start treating character as something you prove through daily choices. Neutral studio background, soft lighting, photorealistic.